Okay, it's Thursday. Ooh, it goes so fast. Okay, well, this is Community Matters on Thursday, and we have Kim Yoshimoto. He's an attorney. She's an attorney. You don't look like a he. It's a she for sure. We learn something every minute. And Mike Iosua, and he's also an attorney. Name of your firm, you guys?
Manaka Sato.
Okay, and you do government affairs, which in other quarters might be called lobbying. But a lot of lawyers do that. I mean, it's the way it works. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the issues that came up in this legislative session, some of the big, expensive, maybe controversial issues that came up in the session, and try to get an inside view of how it works from the vantage of somebody in government affairs. And from somebody who looks toward general policy in the state, because ultimately we're all in it for the common good, right? Say yes.
That is correct.
Common good. Okay, so I want to cover here in terms of what are we calling this? Legislative Session 2016 Legal Repercussions. That's an interesting name. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. And we're going to talk about some of the things that came up, and here are the things. I'll give you an advance on it. One is we're going to talk about health care. Two is we're going to talk about public-private partnerships, which is very important. And we'll talk about housing, that is for the homeless and affordable housing. And these guys are right on the firing line, so they can tell us what's cooking in the square building. Complex curves in the square building. Maybe that's what we should call the show.
That's a better title anyway. Luckily, we're actually missing some of the fire right now.
We're supposed to be at conference committee, but we'd rather talk to you. So
they're all watching us. What do you mean? It's okay. Why do conference committee when you can watch Think Tech?
There you go.
Anyway, yeah, it's true. A lot of stuff happening now. So let's talk about the first one first, healthcare. Healthcare is always interesting. It's interesting on a national level, but certainly on a local level. What are the issues going into the session this year? You look like you're the one to talk about this, Kim.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, there's so many issues, from telehealth to clean claims to pre-authorization. It was interesting because the speaker was pretty bold this session and introduced a measure that would require all physicians, including surgeons, to accept Medicare. That caused a lot of concern among physicians because
they weren't.
They were concerned because Medicare doesn't typically reimburse in the same way. My husband's in healthcare. I've seen it firsthand. So it was pretty controversial and created a little bit of a hornet's nest. What was interesting is that it went away. It was deferred pretty early on.
What was going on before is that some doctors were not doing Medicare patients. The
There's
bill
some
was
that
going
are.
to force
There's
them
some
to
that
do
are.
that.
The bill was going to force them to do it.
But it went away.
It went away, and I think it was a little bit, this is an election season, right? So I think it was a little bit too much of a controversial measure, but it was an interesting one because, you can see both sides, right? I mean, there are a lot of our population who are on Medicare and want access to adequate health care.
What side were you on, if you were on a side?
I don't know if I was on a side. Like I said, I come from a husband who has a small business. He does accept Medicare. He's able to make it work and make it pencil out, but not all physician practices can do that, so I can see both sides.
Yeah. Where's the ARP on this, ARP is supposed to be
question.
protecting the, seniors. And, they're a huge organization. They're nationwide. They have a big, juggernaut here. But sometimes I think, there's an issue that got by them. Maybe this is one that got by them.
I don't know if they took a position early on, but they were at the head of the caregiving bill, maybe.
Well, just to step back really quickly, I think what you got to realize is an organization like ARP or anyone interested in protecting health care for a certain group of people has to be able to understand that you need the insurance to be able to provide for the care, but you also need doctors here. And so when you look at it from a holistic approach, you got to be able to find a balance between making sure that the doctors are properly paid and reimbursed for their expenses, but also to make sure that we have doctors here.
Yeah.
So,
You're right. It's a balance, and for sure we've lost enough doctors already.
And it's difficult to recruit doctors in Hawaii because for a number of reasons. But we're far away from the rest of the mainland, and to be able to recruit them here, we have to make sure that we have incentives and we have the ability for them to practice care the way they feel is necessary.
Let's dwell one more for a moment on this. Who would have put in that bill? Was that a legislator himself or herself, or was that an organization, do you think, where it came from?
I can't remember offhand, but I think it was from the legislature. I don't think it was driven from an organization.
Yeah, okay.
And again, it was an answer to a problem. There's a number of doctors, especially in some of the neighbor islands, that maybe don't accept Medicare, and that leads to a shortage of doctors for people that are on Medicare. And so, it was an answer to a problem. Unfortunately, for that situation, it didn't pan out.
So what do I say to my elderly grandfather, or whatever, who relies on Medicare? What do I say to him? How do I comfort him about this?
Well, there are physicians out there who do accept Medicare. So unfortunately, it's a smaller pool, but you tell him to find the best possible physician that he can who accepts Medicare.
You think this bill will come back?
I think we'll probably see
I think
it
there are a
again.
number of
Yeah.
bills that petered out over this session that will come back.
And that's because, and this is an important point, that's because it's an election year.
Well, typically, you see a little less action.
Because nobody
You
wants
just-
to get out there and
It just
get
is
involved
what
in
it is,
contentious
yeah.
issues, because they might lose votes in the process, yeah.
If I would step back, though, I would say, at the beginning of the legislative session, Speaker Joe Souki really challenged legislators, even in the election year, to be able to move something forward, move some very important issues. But with the thousands of bills that are entered and introduced in the House and on the Senate side, you're bound to have majority of them not make it through all the way through.
Yeah, sure, well, actually, you want that, you don't want
do
too
want
much,
that,
when the legislature is in session, no man's life or property is, what do they say?
It's all in jeopardy.
Yeah. There was an article in this morning's Civil Beat about the way the House is divided up now, and it's kind of sobering, if you will, to see an article like that. It was a good examination of how the House, anyway, and talk about the Senate, how the House breaks down. And they're like six somewhat fragmented groups where, they deal with each other, and that gives them, a certain loyalty to one group or another group on the substance of the bills. So that's the largest group is the Joe Souki group, of course. They call that the dissident group because they were dissident about Calvin Say. Then there's the Calvin Say group, and there's two or three other groups. It's really interesting sociological examination.
And they actually did do a one on the Senate last year. So
Oh, yeah?
maybe you have to check back in the Civil Beat articles, and you could have both leaderships.
You need to know
divided
this, you
up,
guys.
yeah.
This is your bread and butter.
Well, I read both articles, but I haven't verified the accuracy of
Okay.
it. I'm not going to make any statements
Okay,
to that effect.
no confirmation one way or the other.
All right.
Okay. All right, what else in health? Anything?
Yeah, there's a number of bills.
Yeah, so speaking to the lack of physicians here, there's a telehealth bill. We have a telehealth law, but it's a little bit restrictive, and the concept for a telehealth is to sort of reduce costs and offer people additional services that they may not be able to get in their jurisdictions. So basically the bill, made it clear that if you have telehealth services, it should be reimbursed the same way as face-to-face services. You can have telehealth from your home, and a number of other sort of lessening of restrictions that were included.
It's a hard subject. I don't know why, but about 5 or 6 years ago, there was this Israeli company or Israeli guy. He was American, but he was I think his company had some roots in Israel. Anyway, and he was a doctor, and he developed a system where HMSA could actually. He was here. HMSA could allow telehealth, and you could call a doctor. And any doctor. I mean, you got the doctor on the line, on the list, who was then on what I call it, internet watch.
Okay.
And he would give you advice. If it was your doctor, all the better. But you could get a doctor, and he or she would give you advice, and that was something. And often the advice would be go to see a doctor in his office. But at least you could find somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning, and that was good. But it stopped, and I'm not sure why. I think. Maybe some people, didn't think they were going to get. There was no legislation involved. It just was a project by HMSA. Some people just didn't feel comfortable with doctors they didn't know who were sort of anonymous on the web. Even though there was a picture or a video of the person, even a live stream video. And I think a lot of doctors, just as in the case of the Medicare issue, who didn't want to do that because they didn't see it as a good profit center and they didn't want to be involved in it. But that failed. It's no longer the case. That's really too bad.
I think you touched on one of the important points is reimbursements. Is what this bill will do is allow doctors to be reimbursed from Medicaid on the same level as it was to a face-to-face meeting with a patient. So that's an important point. You know, now
Yeah.
they're being compensated for the work they're actually doing, even though it's telehealth.
fair, isn't it?
I think it is, and you know, I wasn't familiar with the telehealth bills that were going through before, but you see it across the country. There's a lot of movement towards telehealth just
Sure.
because of the rural areas where they can't have access to doctors, especially in states like Alaska where you have to fly everywhere in airplanes.
Or in an island state where we
or in
have
an
a
island
disparity
state.
between
Mumbai
islands.
or,
Yeah.
Right.
areas on the neighbor islands.
And I think you'll find that this telehealth bill that the legislator has introduced is sort of on the cutting edge of telehealth practice across the United States.
So what's the condition of the bill?
What's the condition?
passed.
Yeah, passed.
It
It
passed.
passed out of conference and just needs to go for a final floor vote.
Okay, really? So it's, okay, any
think
issue
it's-
about whether the governor will sign it? Is there any controversy about that?
We
Not
haven't
that I'm
had any
aware of, yeah.
controversy,
Oh,
so.
good, good. That's a step forward, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, not only does it help patients, but, you know, this is technology. That's our middle name. We like to see people engaged in developing these kinds of procedures, you know, the internet.
Well, on the neighbor islands, it's tough for them to bring over specialists,
Yeah.
right? So those folks end up having to fly to Oahu at their own expense. So this will help with that issue.
Yeah, that's great. Moving forward for sure. Now this leads me to think, I mean, if you want to talk about other health bills, of course, but this leads me to think about the privatization of the state hospital system, which was in shambles actually, until that deal in Maui. So the deal in Maui, I mean, so far it looks pretty good, doesn't it?
And we got the,
Looks like it's
the lease
working.
agreement,
Yeah.
negotiated, and it's on a step towards moving forward.
Yeah. That would be good, because otherwise, I mean, we'd be back to square one with the state hospital system, which wasn't working.
And this was a really difficult bill because it's the first one for the state hospitals, and they're still working out all the kinks and trying to figure out issues with the workers and issues with equipment and all sorts of things. But I think once this finally makes its way through and we establish a precedent, it can be replicated throughout other hospital systems or
Yeah.
even other state entities.
That's great. It's not simple, it's complicated, and there's, a lot of stuff under the surface, I would say. It's not just simply making a public-private partnership. It's a matter of getting everybody on board, and that goes from the doctors to the administrators to the unions to the public. I mean, it's everybody.
Exactly.
And you got to get them in the boat. So, to the extent that this looks like it's going to work, now we have news that they're going to try it, or somebody's going to try it on the Big Island. What's the
Yeah,
situation
there was
there?
an article in PBN, and we've been hearing rumblings over at the Capitol that the East Hawaii region is being courted. I think it's by Adventist. I think that's the institution. But they need enabling legislation because last year we were able to pass enabling legislation just for Maui. That's as far as the legislature felt comfortable going with this. So each region, as they decide to pursue this, will need to come back and get the same type of legislation passed in order to move forward with negotiations.
Yeah. Now did they really need a bill on this? I mean, sometimes I think Hawaii is the land of process. The license plate sort of changed. Hawaii, the state of process. Do we really need to have legislation? I mean, sometimes I see the legislature, adopting bills that do things that, anybody can do, anybody should do. A department head, should be able to do that all by himself or herself. What happened? Why do we need bills like that in a case like this?
I think one of the things we need to refer back to is the state Supreme Court. So if they say they've issued, made decisions on cases where they didn't allow it, even though an entity had tried to do so. But I think one of the major issues too in this particular circumstance is the fact that the hospital still needed to receive funds from the state on an ongoing basis temporarily to be able to make this deal work. And so if you're obligating state funds, you probably need a bill to be
Oh,
able
yeah.
to do so.
This money is always going to require
Right.
some kind of authority.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so if that happens, what's the benefit to the community?
huge savings, quality health care continuing on. I think it's been projected that the state will save over $230 million in the 10-year period. And they'll continue to have the access to quality health care that they need on the island.
An increase in services. I think that's written into the legislation.
Yeah.
Because at the point where we're at last year, because they were at such a fiscal deficit, they were looking at closing some major services. And so are the neighbor islands as well, the other neighbor islands. So
Where it hurts more. Yeah.
And so, Kaiser is the entity that they're negotiating with, and Kaiser has a very strong presence on Maui. So I'm sure they'll be able to provide adequate services and grow them.
When you make a public-private partnership of say, an existing hospital facility like Kaiser and a failing hospital, and you put them together, I would imagine that means that money has to flow from the new owner to the old hospital because, to revitalize it and all that. So it would be contemplated then that maybe staff, money, equipment, who knows what, resources would have to flow from Kaiser to the hospital that's taking over. I think that's what happened in Maui too, or what is happening.
That's one of the many benefits of the public-private partnership is because they have the expertise of a national corporation that does healthcare. That's their job.
And that would make it a good bet for because Kaiser is a national, and Kaiser has nationally has deep pockets. Even if the local Kaiser is losing money, they can still get capital from their national.
They've committed to invest in Maui Memorial.
Yeah. But one thing that struck me as a matter of policy is that we're going to have this more and more. This is the new state hospital system is going to be the new privatized hospital system. Okay, and we're going to have it's a consolidation, isn't it? It's a consolidation. Health will be consolidated among a fewer number of players, right?
Potentially,
so.
yeah, potentially. I mean, all the state hospitals are under one entity right now, HHSC. So, I mean, you're actually splitting it up and making state hospitals out of a couple different entities, but they are consolidating the fact that it's a national or a local company adopting another hospital.
Yeah.
But you get the benefits of having a private entity with an expertise in the area to be able to run the hospital, and you get opportunities in the private side that you don't have in the public side for negotiations, for using the resources, like you said, whether it's worker resources or other types of resources.
Yeah.
And while it's overall, this is sort of what needed to happen. I think most people would agree, and there are many benefits to it. There are some, detriments, and I would speak to the workers who are fabulous. I mean, we went over to Maui Memorial a couple of times last session.
Definitely
and got to know
a
a lot
perk.
of people. Definitely a perk. They do excellent work. This situation is not their fault, and they're going to have to go through some hard transitions. So the legislature is looking at a couple of measures for separation benefits that might ease the transition. So, it's tough. It's tough for the staff with a lot of the uncertainty, although I think most of them will probably be acquired by Kaiser.
Yeah.
So, that's something that needs to be thought through, and as we move forward, and there's legislation that may be submitted for other regions.
Well, it's interesting on a couple of levels. One is that you guys, as advocates, government relations advocates, get to embrace an issue. It's not just one bill, and it's not just one position. It's not one constituent either. It's you get to become experts in this case, health. So state policy around health. It's wonderful, because that will serve you in good stead for years and years, no matter who's in the legislature, no matter who's tussling about what, no matter what the bills are coming and going, you will know a lot about health.
Enjoy health. It's very fascinating.
And it is a benefit, and we're taking the cue from some very well-respected and very knowledgeable legislators who've worked very hard on, from the health committee chairs to the Maui legislators. They've lived this issue for several years, and so it's great. It's a great opportunity to learn from some of these experts.
Yeah. Let's take a short break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about something else then. Let's talk about homeless after the break, okay? We'll be right back. This is Community Matters. This is Kim Yoshimoto and Mike Iosua, and we'll be right back.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. My name is Anu Hittel, and I host a show, Climate Change Beyond Outrage. In it, we go beyond outrage to look at solutions to climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. Join me every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Hawaii Standard Time. See you then.
Aloha, my name is Josh Green. I host a show called Healthcare in Hawaii here on ThinkTech. We get together once a week or sometimes twice a month. Depends. When we're busy, we get together less often, but we love to see you here to talk about the preeminent healthcare issues in our state. Our programs vary very widely. We talk about economics, we talk about healthcare, we talk about social issues on this program. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on ThinkTech. This show is so very dear to my heart. We talk with artists of various different ilk here about the process that they go through for their art. So we talk about what they're doing, why they are doing it, how they do it. And it's a show that is inspiring. This is what I hear from people all the time. And a show that will teach you something, sometimes something about yourself. I hope you'll join us. The show is Center Stage. It's on ThinkTech every Wednesday at 2 o'clock. We'll see you then.
Okay, we're back. You know, and I'll tell you the truth. After that discussion, you guys, about healthcare and public-private partnerships in health and doctor shortages, sitting here with you now, I feel healthier.
You look like
Well,
you've
that's
improved your health.
Yeah. You know, we all have to focus on that kind of thing. In fact, let me say, we all have to focus on everything. You know, this is an unusual state in terms of legislation. It's unusual because we have the square building sitting right in the middle of our lives and our community, physically and morally and spiritually and all that. It's right there. We could be there in 3 minutes from this, you know, from this studio. And that's so for everybody. And, well, you know, legislation is an industry. I'm sorry to say that. Sometimes it's too much. But anyway, I want to go to another issue now, and that's housing. And I think housing is important for a couple of reasons. One is because it's clear from an economic point of view we don't have enough housing here. I mean, forget about, you know, level of wealth and disadvantage or versus advantage. We just don't have enough housing to support the community, you know, going forward. That's one thing, and then that's one of the reasons for that. Everybody knows is because Hawaii is the state of process. You know, the first Mililani increment took 40 years to actually build, from the concept to the, you know, all the permitting and finally the construction. 40 years. I'm not kidding. Castle and Cook. They spoke about it at one of our programs. I can't do that. Okay, so that's one, is there's not enough housing. Two is the housing is too expensive. And you know, you go to a very formidable issue. It's the fact that we live on an island and there's limited land, and the way things have come up, there's, you know, too few owners of too much land holdings. And the Great Mahale of 1848 did not work, sorry. Some say we should do another one, yeah. So it's expensive, you know. And there are other issues too about construction and unions and what have you that make housing so expensive. And you know, Neil Abercrombie was into, you know, tall, high-rise, and you know, I'm not sure that's working the way we contemplated it, especially in Kakako. And finally, at the end of the day, housing, the cost of housing and occupancy versus wages is not syncopated. I mean, it's not synced up. So the result is that a lot of people don't make enough money, and you have working poor who are homeless. This is really tragic. So all of this is a kettle of worms, and it falls on the state legislature, and I suppose the city to some extent. So all those things, in my view, are in play. What happened in this session? How were these things addressed, if at all?
Well, I mean, one of the issues that, one of the bills that kind of address this issue is Senate Bill 2561, which seeks to find a way to build about 22,000 more affordable rental units over the next 10 years. I think one of the statistics that's cited in the bill is that there's going to be a need for about 64,000 units over that same time period. So we're not even at our goal. We're only hitting about a third of the need. So there's going to continue to be a problem. And as you mentioned, the affordable housing crisis leads to homelessness, where you have these working poor. And what Senate Bill 2561 did was to establish a working group to be able to figure out how are we going to get these rental units built. It goes down from the number of units needed to finding ways to incentivize private developers to be able to build these affordable units.
So what do these bills do?
When is it due?
What do they do?
What do they do? This one forms the working group.
It establishes a goal and forms a working
What's
group.
the goal? Oh,
The
more housing.
22,000.
Okay,
Yeah.
but it doesn't actually take action.
I don't think anyone right now could tell you what the answer is to making more affordable housing.
Couldn't we, the three of us, sit here for a while and figure it out?
We could sit here and we could try it out, but I don't know if that would be as effective.
We haven't been elected yet.
Yeah, we haven't been effective, and I don't know about you.
It's tough because it's hard to get your return on investment in affordable housing. So there needs to be some way to incentivize developers to be able to incorporate it. And I mean, ideally, you'd want somebody to come in and just totally philanthropically do this all across the state. That doesn't typically happen.
And Hawaii doesn't really do well with incentives. We had Act 221 a few years ago. It was intended to incentivize tech. And everybody beat it up, and then it went away. And the tech startups that were, that came out of it, all or most of them disappeared. And we had all kinds of initiatives through, 2010 or so that were intended to develop a tech industry. We still don't have a notable tech industry here, and everybody talks about jobs. It's the same thing with housing. I mean, we know we have a problem. I mean, the solution is build more housing. And I think we would all agree that it's an incentive program for developers, right? Yeah, and I think we ought to get young developers, like 25-year-old millennial developers. We're going to find a way to motivate them. Go take a risk, try a company. Maybe tech is not what they want. Maybe they should be developers.
Yeah, I think the problem with incentives sometimes is that you're incentivizing the wrong thing. And if you're incentivizing something that you don't want to happen, then it doesn't matter. You can have millions of dollars thrown at it, and it won't end up in the result you want. So I think what this working group kind of takes into consideration is getting experts in different fields, from the Office of Planning to private developers. And the Office of Planning has their policies, and the representatives from the House of Representatives or the Senate and the developers, they all have how they're looking at this issue. And if you combine it together, then hopefully we'll get the right incentives. But ultimately, it comes down to the people that are building the buildings. So if you're not incentivizing developers, the right developers, to build the affordable housing, the incentives aren't going to work.
If I were out there watching this, the question would dawn on me, and I will pose it to you because I think it's in the air, is that why did this happen only in 2016? Where were we before? Where didn't these problems exist in 2015, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, so forth? Why only now do we have a working group? We're not very far down the path if we're only starting a working group.
I mean, I think they're thinking about this at the city with TOD. I mean, the hope with rail, as rail continues to come to Honolulu, is that around the stations we'll be able to include a lot of affordable housing. I think people are thinking about it, and we didn't really track this issue last session, so there could have been measures that were looked at and maybe didn't pass through.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that this measure is focused on rental housing because, a lot of the more lower income families need that option.
Well, there are other cities in the country where rental is the norm. New York City,
We don't have
most
enough here.
people, 90% of the people in New York do not own co-ops or condos or brownstones. They rent. They rent their whole lives, in all 5 boroughs. So we can do that. We should do that.
It's not that nothing has happened over the past 10, 20 years. It's that it just hasn't kept pace with the number of affordable housing unit needs that we have. And I think this is sort of the legislators' recognition that this is a crisis, and we need to find the best minds and put them together and come up with a resolution.
So this will pass, or it has passed. Huh?
It's I don't know where it is right now,
Let me
but
see,
it's
I
either
have
going
it
to pass
here.
today or tomorrow, or it won't.
Okay.
So
Oh,
we'll
Oh,
know.
it did pass. It did pass out of conference.
So it's likely to, and since it's not a money bill, it's just a study bill, it's not going to be controversial. It's just going to give us more information about what to do, recommendations based on best practices elsewhere. Okay. What about the homeless now? I mean, that's kind of crisis. Gee whiz, what legislation was contemplated? What was proposed? What went through?
Well, you want to take it?
Go ahead.
There's a bill that seeks to make shelters more appealing for the homeless. So it creates minimum standards. For example, how many bathrooms are they going to offer? Is there going to be storage where they can put their personal property? Will there be partitions so that there can be some privacy? The idea is to, and also, you know, there are stipends that are awarded to these homeless shelters, and they were automatic, so now it's going to be based on performance. So I think the idea is to really try to get the homeless to want to go to, because there is I would assume, a certain percentage of the population who maybe don't want to go to shelters for whatever reason. So that's the purpose and the goal, and hopefully the standards will help. You know, DHS, I think, is the agency assigned to this, achieve that. And they got some funds and some additional bodies, I think, to help administer.
Right, and I think what, I guess one of the ways that this is an issue that can't be resolved in this session or, maybe even multiple sessions, but there's the way to tackle the issue is to try and segment the population so that you can identify what the individual needs are and be able to address those needs and hopefully make a little dent and move forward with alleviating some of the homelessness issues. One of the bills talks about appropriating money to be able to do outreach to the chronically homeless due to mental health issues. And so you're looking at a population who probably is on the street because they're not taking their proper medications or because they don't know the way to get help. And so this will be able to go out and send some of the Department of Health workers to be able to help address those needs that they have and hopefully bring them off the street and get them the care that they need.
Well, I guess we agree that whatever is happening now is not enough, because the crisis seems to be, if not growing, I think it is growing, but if not growing, at least it's continuing without any remediation, and there are a lot of homeless people, and if you treat homelessness as an economic, matter first, of course mental health is part of, but if you treat it as an economic matter first, any problem in the economy, any weakness in the economy increases the number of homeless.
That's
When
not going
people are
away.
at the margin, right?
Yeah, it's not going away.
So certainly, whatever happens in this session, there'll be more next year, I guess.
I would assume so, yeah.
But I would ask you the same question, about process. I mean, why does the legislature, in its wisdom, have to determine the number of bathrooms? Are they expert in the number of bathrooms?
I don't think they themselves are determining the number of bathrooms, but they're recognizing that there is an issue and that some of these shelters perhaps aren't to the level that, a homeless person would want to stay at. If he has the opportunity to stay in
Can't
somewhere.
that be done by an administrator, somebody akamai about how homeless think and live and feel and aspire?
Yeah, potentially, yeah. But I think in this particular bill is what they're doing is trying to ensure that it happens.
Yeah.
And
There was talk about a bill for an authority. Maybe I saw this vis-a-vis another state, but creating a housing authority for affordable housing or a housing authority for homeless or both. What do you guys feel about that? Is that coming down the pike?
are you getting into your process-oriented authorities?
Good.
Another layer, another
Thank you.
layer.
He got me on that one. We're going to take a short break so I can recover. That's Mike Iosua and Kim Yoshimoto from the firm of Kudo and
Imanaka Asato.
Imanaka and what?
Asato.
Asato. Okay. Imanaka and Asato. Yeah. Okay. We'll be right back after this short break.
Aloha, my name is Reg Baker, and I'm the host of Business in Hawaii with Reg Baker. Business in Hawaii is a program that talks about the positive stories in Hawaii. We're tired of hearing all the negativity. We don't want to hear about all the downside. We want to hear positive stories about business in Hawaii, and that's what Business in Hawaii is all about. We broadcast live every Thursday at 2 o'clock. Go to livestream.com for that live broadcast, and we also rebroadcast on Olelo 54 and OC 16. We look forward to seeing you on the show. Take care, and we'll see you next week. Aloha.
Aloha, this is Maria Mera, and I'm here to invite you to my bilingual show, Viva Hawaii on Think Tech Hawaii, every other Monday at 3 p.m. We're here to inform, motivate, and entertain you. Join us. Hola, soy María Mera y estoy aquí para invitaros a mi show bilingüe Viva Hawái en ThinkTech Hawái cada 2 lunes a las 3 de la tarde. Estamos aquí para informaros, motivaros y entreteneros. Apuntaros.
Okay, we're back, we're live, and I wish we had more time. We have 10 minutes or so, and I'm going to cover whatever else you guys want to cover. But one of the things we talked about in the break was Airbnb, which is all the rage these days, especially in Kailua on the beach. Senator Laura Thielen, speaking out about Airbnb, which is, sort of a good idea, the same way Uber and Lyft are good ideas, as a statement of modern technology, but there are problems that we need to tune up. So what's happening with that?
So you mentioned this is sort of the way that tourism is going. I mean, it's definitely here to stay. We're not getting rid of it. So we're trying to figure out what's the best way to deal with the issues, whether it's land use issues or traffic issues, or I think one of the ones that's been coming up is the ability to be able to grab the TAT from these units that they're not necessarily paying it. So House Bill 1850 is one of those bills that is seeking to address that issue by allowing these online transient accommodation brokers such as Airbnb or VRBO to be able to collect the tax, the TAT or GET, whatever's applicable, and be able to pass it on to the Department of Taxation in order to be able to collect that money that we're losing out on right now.
Yeah.
And I think one of the issues, well, first of all, I saw another statistic that we're losing maybe $12 million a year because these online brokers aren't collecting any taxes from the transit accommodation units. And so, that's a substantial amount of money that could go to fund a lot of things. So on one hand, we see this easy opportunity to collect the taxes. But on the other hand, some people feel that this bill isn't going far enough. They feel like, if we have the information, the transit the broker is collecting the information, they should be able to turn over the addresses and make sure that they're in compliance with any land use laws. So you're kind of getting the balance. Do we want to just stick with the money and collect what we can now, or do we want to go for the full gamut and make sure that every unit is in complete compliance with all the laws?
Yeah, we're in a transformation here. You're right. The technology is changing the way, the whole vacation rentals business operates. But, I make a comparison between that and, say, Amazon. Amazon sells stuff here, and nobody pays gross excise tax. And at one point, Amazon said, well, if the state wants to tax us, we're out of town. We're not going to sell anything to anybody in Hawaii. So what you have is growing pains around these kinds of issues. But I suggest to you that the real play here is not about tax, because citizens so rarely, file bills, submit bills that tell the legislatures they should impose a tax. That's not what citizens do. But people like to use tax as a penalty against those who are in the market competing against them in some way. But I suggest that the tax thing is just a way to stop these vacation rentals, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I see your point, but I don't know if I'd agree with that, because I don't even think, if you add the TAT and the GET onto these rented units, they're gonna go away. I mean, they're here to stay. And
yeah, right.
They can be a very important part of a tourism economy. Yeah. It's not that they're all bad, but they need to pay their fair share of taxes.
Well, they got to be regulated. I agree with that.
Well, Airbnb is supportive of the earlier version of this bill. They want their vacation rental operators to be paying. And so this is a way for them to be able to kind of take the responsibility, collect and remit. The bill just grew so big now and includes all these other issues.
Yeah,
So I think it kind of started out as we want to be good players here, right?
Yeah.
We want to help, but now it's big and it's concerning.
Laura Thielen was talking yesterday, the day before, about the camping aspect. It's not somebody's home now; it's the beach. I guess there aren't enough, B&B units left in Kailua, so now it's the beach. And what really got her wired was that Airbnb was saying to people, well, there are no bathrooms on the beach. And so you're going to have to find a way to go to the bathroom. You stay in these tents. But, people go au naturel.
Oh, yeah.
Don't want to go swimming in those waters.
So, I mean, this is something the legislature could get pretty excited about. To find out that Airbnb was actually saying things like that to their customers. That's got to be regulated.
Right.
So how does the bill stand? You know, what chance do you think?
That's-
It's this afternoon, I think.
Yeah, this afternoon. Well, you can call us later on and give you an update on what happened with it. So,
Yeah, exciting. Okay, any other bills or advice you want to leave with our listeners here?
yeah, I mean, there's a couple other interesting bills that have come up, and one of them that seems to be gathering a lot of headlines is the Marsy's Law bill.
What is that?
That's the victims' rights bill. It's kind of patterned off of other state legislations. For example, in California, where they did a constitutional amendment to allow victims of certain crimes to be able to have standing to follow how the perpetrator is charged and tried and released. So
What
that-
rights would those be in a
to
criminal
be able to have
proceeding?
to be able to have notice of what's going on.
With
So-
like parties in the case.
Correct.
Wouldn't that be an impediment on the prosecution? They got to deal with that.
That's the argument against it. And some people have suggested that we could handle Marsy's Law through statute, but there is some very good legal minds that feel that the victim wouldn't have legal standing under statute to be able to have notice of these types of proceedings. So it would take a constitutional amendment.
Who? Constitutional amendments now, theirs process.
It's going to be a difficult one.
You know, but there exists a common law, well, not a common, I guess it's a common law, right? Yeah. For the victim to sue the perpetrator. Go to court in a civil case.
Civilly.
And since the conviction in the criminal side is what, beyond a reasonable doubt, and preponderance of evidence is a lesser standard in the civil side, they can get a conviction, really. I mean, not a conviction, but a tort judgment, yeah, very easily if there's already been a conviction. Why don't they just sue him?
Well, I think for a lot of the victims, or oftentimes it's the victim's family because the victim is no longer with us, they need that closure. They need to be able to find out what's happening and find out that their son, daughter, mother, father is receiving some type of, I guess, vindication for the crime that has happened to them.
Yeah. And Marcy was a person, I guess, who was a victim.
Right.
But that was not in Hawaii. That was in another state.
I believe it was California.
So, I mean, this is an example of a bill that has had traction on the mainland, which the legislature or the parties that are advancing the bill have taken note of as a mainland phenomenon, and apparently successful, at least in some states. And so that's why it's here, yeah.
Correct, yeah. And, we have victims here, same as any other state, and they have their rights that they would like to see protected.
Let me just ask you guys one more question, and this is something that I think about all the time. We have climate change, which we didn't put that on our list of titles, but that's
It's a
issue.
show unto itself.
Yeah. We did cover a little bit about housing and the economy and and the brain drain and all those things that people talk about all the time. These are major issues. If left unsolved, will mean the end of our society over time. You can agree on that. But we have bills about ivory. A few years ago, we had a bill about leaf blowers. I don't know if you remember, noise from leaf blowers. This is a big deal in the paper every day about leaf blowers. So how can we get legislative policy, legislative activity focused on the really big issues that are life and death for the future of the state instead of dealing with leaf blowers? How do we do that?
I think you probably need grassroots efforts, to sort of put together a package, get somebody to champion it, and do the best you can through the session.
Yeah.
I know that they're tackling that in Congress. I
Yeah.
mean, that's Senator Schatz's.
Yes.
Yeah, he's working really hard on that.
Agree
So
with
maybe
that.
we should
Good point.
kind of follow what he's doing and sort of replicate it here
Yeah.
at the state level.
Yeah.
No, I would say talk to your legislators too. I think most legislators, they really want to know what their constituents want to see and what the issues are. And they may disagree with them, but most of them are open to hearing from their constituents.
Well, that goes to the point of, you guys are professionals, you're advocates in a professional way, government affairs advocates, and a lot of clientele want to have those services legally. But that's not to say that Joe Dokes can't walk up to the square building and make himself heard. He just
Absolutely.
has to be organized about it and has to get his thoughts straight and maybe get a constituency together so he'll be heard. So it's not limited to a few people. It should be
Definitely
more
not.
people, especially on the issues which are critical. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so there's camera 2. There it is. And those are a bunch of kids drinking in a bar. See the picture? So what do you say to them about this session and about involvement in the legislative process in general? Go ahead, Mike.
I would say get involved. I mean, this is an election year. This is a time where you can make your voice heard. This is a time for especially young people to let legislators and let the public know how you feel about any issue, a variety of issues. You know, whether you want to see plastic bags banned or whether you want to see climate change. Get involved and voice your opinion.
Okay, Kim, how about you?
Vote. Too many young people don't vote. They need to vote.
Yeah.
We have an election year coming up.
Yeah.
Get registered. And yeah, get involved. Get involved if there's a particular legislator or candidate who really supports something that you care about. Help them out. It all starts from a grassroots effort, especially in these district races.
Okay, Mike Iosua and Kim Yoshimoto from Imanaka and Asado. Thank you so much for coming down and being part of our show and our discussion and our roundtable about these issues. I hope we can get you back again on other issues and other thoughts and initiatives and issues and thoughts and initiatives and problems.
Thanks so much
Thank
for having
you
us
so
on the
much
show.
for having us.
Thank you.